Well, today's story from Rwanda is the story of the maternity center in Kivuruga, Rwanda. So Kivuruga is an area, geographic area, kind of like a county in the United States, located up in the mountains of northern Rwanda, up near Volcanoes National Park, where it borders Uganda and the Congo. Not quite that far north, but about a half hour from the mountains. So up there pretty far. And on our first trip in 2009, we had an opportunity to visit the maternity center. This is part of the Bushoka Health Center. So there's the food and nutrition area, which we were able to help, and I'll tell stories about that as well. But there's also this maternity center as part of the clinic. And when we walked in there in 2009, we were getting a tour, met the staff. We walked through a waiting room. This is, third world Africa. So it's a waiting room where we saw, pregnant woman right next to a malaria person, next to people that had other stuff going on that we weren't sure about. But they said, yeah, the waiting room is just everybody's kind of all together in this one area, mosquito nets on everything, of course. And then we walked down the hall a little bit into this room. It's probably about maybe 10-foot square, maybe 12 foot. Um, and this was the maternity ward. It was a single room, and there was two beds with stirrups. And there's no running water. There's no floor drain, no electricity. The staff that was there were volunteer, and they'd been there for a while, but they'd never had any formal training. The equipment they had was very rudimentary. I mean, certainly just the bare bones, basic stuff. If anything bad happened, there's nothing there to do to help in that situation. So this is where for the mothers that made it to the clinic, this is where the babies would be born. Now, most mothers didn't make it there. The ones that made it there, this is where they would be delivered. And as we had this conversation, we were talking about infant mortality and just devastating. 1 in 5 children born at childbirth or died at childbirth. And it was very difficult. And so asking questions about, well, what happens in some sort of an emergency? Well, in the rainy seasons, there's nothing they could do because the ambulance couldn't even get close to the place. If it was really an emergency, they could carry the mother about 45 minutes to where the ambulance could meet them. The ambulance would drive up from Kigali. So even in the best case scenario, it'd be about a 2-hour drive from Kigali to come to Kivuruga to pick up the patient, and another 2 hours to go back down to the main hospital in Kigali. So at the end of the day, if things went wrong, things just went wrong. And there were buckets in this room, buckets where they would keep things like the afterbirth. Very, very tough to be there, very tough to see, very tough to smell. And as I was asking questions about, what happened if things go wrong, it dawned on me, how if I lived in Kivuruga, Rwanda, if my wife and I had lived in Kivuruga, and we had our twin boys who we had in 1996. If we had been in Kivuruga, the issues that we had, my first son would have been born just fine. The second son, however, in the U.S., we had all kinds of problems. They had to do an emergency C-section. It was chaos. I was out in the hall signing papers. I'd run in and see my wife just cut wide open. They were racing to get the cord and get Ryan out of there. And as I was in this room in Kivuruga, I realized that if we lived there, Ryan certainly would have died. My wife probably would have died because of the issues that we had. And then my daughter Annie would have never been born. So how different my life would have been with just me and my son Chris versus me and my wife Tracy and our sons Chris and Ryan and my daughter Annie. And it was a very, very poignant, emotional moment of realization of how grateful I was to live in the United States. That basically, it was that point where I started using the language. I won the lottery just by living in the United States, just by having access to first world medical facilities. And so this poignant moment, which really struck all of us on that trip in 2009, we immediately said, well, how can we help with this maternity situation? And as we strategized with the group that we were part of, the problem was that there were so many issues. We had just started getting involved in Kivaruga. 2008, the project was launched. It was a 15 to 17-year project, and the maternity center was just too far down the priority list. So we started working on things like food security, nutrition. So we funded a nutrition center. Clean water was a huge issue at the time. Education about AIDS, how AIDS is transferred, and those sorts of things. Those were the biggest priorities at the time. And so it really bothered us that we couldn't get involved in that maternity center and see if we could do something there, because the community of East Central Minnesota that we're a part of has a ton of doctors, and we knew we could get a bunch of support. And they said, well, that's great, and there will be a time for that. But right now, it's really about getting these other pieces in place, getting the water, getting the food security, getting education about nutrition and disease prevention and those sorts of things. So fast forward from 2009 to 2011, our second trip, we went there, and the same sort of experience. I brought another group of people there, a new group, and we toured it, and everything was the same, and we had the same experience and the same sort of weight of difficulty there. Now, it was offset a little bit by the progress we were seeing in the nutrition center and some of the advances there, but still this maternity center just ached me and everybody else in the trip in 2011. It was their first time, so it was their first exposure. And so for me now, it was the second time going back and seeing no changes. Same thing in 2013. Again, a ton of great stuff happening, but nothing in the maternity center area. And I kept pushing, is there a way that we can make this happen? Is there a way that we can make this happen? And they kept saying, we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to wait. And so, 2009 to 11 to 13, 4 years had passed. We go there in 2015, bring another new group of people there, other than Shannon, who was the only other person that's been there twice. And we went there and we toured the same thing. And it was just another sort of, now 6 years have passed, and I just had this weight on me about this. And then as we left there, we went to the Bushoka Health Center, did their thing there. And then we started walking up this hill, which is common, what we typically would have done. And it was odd because the staff was kind of looking at me like kind of odd. And I was like, this seems odd. I don't know what's going on here. But they'd gotten to know me. I built friendships. They kind of looked at me. I saw a couple of people kind of smile, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I guess they're just enjoying the day, enjoying our time there, because they're also grateful and gracious. Whenever you go there, they just love having you there and visit. And it's just the highlight of their year. But it was a little bit different. I didn't know what was going on. It was a little bit odd. And we come to the crest of this hill, and I look over, and there's this new maternity center that they built, funded in a good chunk from the work that we had done through child sponsorship and other funding that we had done. A lot of those funds were used for this maternity center, and they had decided to keep it a surprise for me. It's hard to explain the impact that had on me. I was paralyzed, and this doesn't happen to me. I'm just a very logical, analytical person. Now I feel deep emotion. I really wanted to get involved, and I really pushed for that medical maternity center to be impacted and changed. But this floored me. This absolutely floored me. I remember just saying to them, "Is that it?" It said right in French their maternity. And so I knew what it was. I didn't know what to say. Like I assumed if they were going to be doing this, they would involve me. They'd get us to do more fundraising. But apparently all the stuff that we've done, we've raised nearly $2.5 million. Apparently a chunk of that funding could be used, and they just made the strategic call to not let me know in advance, just so that they could surprise me. And I mean, tears were just rolling down, and I'm trying to fight them right now. Here we are even, years later, 5 years later, I guess. And it was such a profound moment. And we went inside, and there was running water, and there was clean beds, and there's a proper waiting room, and all kinds of great medical supplies and facilities and things that we'd look at right now and say, oh, that's kind of a outdated hospital. But for them, it was state of the art, and it was clean, and it was on the top of the hill, and it was just unbelievably magnificent. And that moment, between that, and we also had a moment with Josie Ann, who I'll talk about later, a real positive moment. Those moments just absolutely floored me. And I don't know if I'll ever recover from that emotionally, how good I felt about that, how proud I was of the work that I had done, the work that we've done in East Central Minnesota. And I think the people that were with me on the trip team had heard some of the stories about the maternity ward. So I think they were pretty excited about it, but not feeling that same weight of why is Steve so messed up here? It's just a new building. Well, it had been a 6-year process of just pushing, pushing, and trying and trying, and deeply wanting to, and then layering on this personal, emotional side of the importance of having proper medical facilities when children are born. And so it was an overwhelming moment for me. I remember blogging about it, and I just wanted to share that with you. One of the great things to come out of the work that we've done with our response, with all the work that we've done in Rwanda, and I think that story is something that can be told in many areas of third world countries around the world. So this is just one area, but maybe when you think about this, and you can multiply it by hundreds, if not thousands, of locations, and realize the positive impact that we've had in the world, for those of you who have been involved in helping in that sort of way. So I just wanted to share that story with you. I'm trying to share these stories as a way of not losing them. As I get older, my memory gets gone, and I've had a lot of people say, "Well, you got to tell stories about Africa." And I've tried to set up a couple community ed things and that sort of thing, but this is an opportunity for me to start sharing stories from Rwanda, from Africa, and I hope you enjoy it. I'd love to hear in the comments any experiences that you've had, how this has touched you, any ideas that you have for future stories, but just engage with the conversation in that way. So thanks for letting me share. Thanks for watching the video. Take care.